Thanks very much. Nice to be here. Sorry for the English, you know. It's my deficiency, my problem. Unfortunately, now it's going to be your problem for today, but we'll try. So I'm here with UC Davis, Chile. A few of my colleagues are in the front row here as well. Just to introduce you first to UC Davis, Chile. We are, as the name says, from the University of California at Davis. And the University of California, Davis is always ranked #1 worldwide in agriculture and forestry. It's also very strong in medicine and engineering and others as well. It has a very active research program, $750 million in research. And the campus really has a culture of innovation. So a lot of this research results in inventions, patents, license agreements, and a number of startup companies. So that's really what we're trying to do here in Chile, is to bring not only the expertise in agricultural research, but also this culture of innovation. And we have a very, very long history of working with Chile. UC Davis has been working intensively in Chile since about 1965. Nice. You can dance also. And so this is really one way that we're now able to reinforce and strengthen some of the connections that we've had historically with Chile. This is President Bachelet in her first time with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor. These two, they're a pair. Okay, and the opportunity, of course, is that we're very similar to Chile geographically, ecologically, agriculturally. So we just like to say that California is sort of a fat upside down Chile. But lots of similarities, lots of opportunities to work together. Okay, but what I want to talk about today is big data. These are some quotes here. Big data describes data sets that are so large, complex, or rapidly changing that they push the limits of analytical capability. So this is really the software interface. The ability to analyze very, very large data sets. Of course, the most important kinds of big data are those that can have a big impact for society, public health, or the economy. And it turns out that agriculture, both globally and in the United States, has been identified as a target for big data application by technology developers. This includes both startups and multinational companies. I'll mention a few of these later. But a lot of these established firms include those that are currently in the ag sector, but a lot of non-ag sector companies are entering this. Google has spun off a major multi-billion-dollar company focused in agriculture. So why agriculture? Why is this a field worth exploring? Well, primarily because agriculture matters. 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. 40% of employment worldwide is in agriculture. That's not so evident here, but especially in less developed countries, of course, agriculture is the primary employer. 70% of the worldwide water withdrawals are for agriculture. There's 10,000 years of food production history, but those 10,000 years have to be matched in the next 50 years. And there's still nearly 1 billion hungry people on the planet. So agriculture is an important area. Agriculture is also changing, driven by a few things. Here we are at about 7 billion people. By 2050, there will be 35% more population, another 2 or 3 billion. But equally important is that there's a growing demand for animal-based diets. So as countries increase in their wealth, they tend to transition from a plant-based diet to an animal-based diet. And an animal-based diet requires much more crop areas. So the animal-based diets are predicted to increase 60% even by 2020 and more by 2050. In addition, there's this growing demand for non-food crops, for biofuels, and other types of industrial applications. So when you add it all up, population, animal-based diets, biofuels, the demand for agricultural production is estimated to increase by 70 to 100% by 2050. And this is going to also be in the face of unprecedented environmental changes. So it's a huge challenge for agriculture. 100% increase, and hopefully doing this sustainably. So some of the approaches, there are many approaches, but the overall approach focuses on this total factor productivity. Every input, every factor that goes into agriculture has to be most productive in producing agricultural outputs. So this involves inputs of land, labor, chemicals, machinery, all optimized to produce the most food. And there's been a number of revolutions in agriculture. A very important one that spanned from the 1960s to 1990s was called the Green Revolution. This Green Revolution nearly doubled agricultural output in the world. We are in the midst, but possibly coming to the end of a biotechnology revolution where greater inputs in genetics and genomics have increased productivity more. But we're also entering this green data revolution, and this is to apply data science to optimize management of every single input. And so this is where big data is coming in, but as you'll see, more importantly, the ability to analyze this data to make decisions that enhance productivity. Okay, so there are a few transformative technologies. These happen to be some of the technologies we're working on in our center, but there's two that I'll talk about. First, our advanced crop genetics. Later, I'll talk about precision farming, two areas that both rely on big data, the ability to aggregate, accumulate large data sets, but again, more importantly, to analyze it and use that data for something important. The basis of advanced crop genetics is genome sequencing. DNA sequencing is now an inexpensive commodity. It's cheap. I could sequence your genome for less than $1,000. And there's a lot of DNA sequence data around. One laboratory in China, the biggest one in the world, is able to sequence more than 2,000 human genomes per day, 6 trillion bases. So the challenge is not really the collection of data, but it's the curation and the analysis of this data. If we go back just 15 years, the human genome was released. This was a 10-year program, and it cost $3 billion. What happened really started about 9 years ago was the development of new machines that increased the throughput of DNA sequencing, one developed by Roche, another by Illumina, which continues to be the standard today, increased the output of sequencing by a huge quantum leap. And as part of that quantum leap, there was also a huge reduction in the cost per genome. So genome sequencing became cheap, able to generate lots of data, lots of human genomes for very rapidly and also inexpensively. So there are a number of plant and microbial genomes that are at UC Davis, domestic cats, horse, dogs, cattle, chicken, trees, different types of legumes, rice, wheat, etc. So a number of genome sequencing projects going on every day. And so it's becoming not only easy, but to the extent you can analyze these genomes, you can begin to have some really important impacts. No, this is just where we do it. It's the huge building dedicated just to genomes. Okay, so how can you use some of this data? What's the point? It's all ACGT. Well, of course, there is the point. One of the programs we're working on in Chile is genomics for wine grapes. And here we're looking at the genetic characterization of wine grape germplasm for a very specific purpose. The strategy here is to sequence an entire genome. In this case, we're actually sequencing Don Melchor, a iconic variety here in Chile. Also Cabernet Sauvignon. This becomes the reference genome. And then because genome sequencing is so cheap, you can sequence hundreds of individuals in addition to that. And what we're looking for here we're looking for single variants in this entire genome relative to the reference. And by doing that, we can now have the basis to genetically identify individual, very closely related clones of Cabernet Sauvignon. So these are different clones that are important here in Chile. When a winery goes to a nursery to buy 1,000 Cabernet Sauvignons Old Wente, it'll get 1,000 vines. And 5 years later, when they're actually producing fruit, it becomes apparent that they're not all Old Wente. In fact, they may not even all be Cabernet Sauvignon. So this introduces a huge cost, a huge inefficiency in vineyards. And so being able to identify these individual clones early on, you can deliver pure, genetically pure stocks to wineries. Another way that we're using the same kind of technology is in disease diagnostics. There are a number of diseases of grapes, including viruses that affect the leaves, but importantly, some fungal diseases that affect the wood. And we've been in vineyards just a little bit south of here where every fifth vine is dead because of these diseases in the vine itself. So the ability to use the same kind of sequencing technology allows us to go in and identify exactly what the diseases are, and to do this at a very early stage before symptoms are evident. So in this case, we're using this deep sequencing to discover disease-causing organisms, to clean the propagation material, and then to monitor pathogens in the field. It's extremely rapid, generates millions of genetic reads or DNA sequences in a few hours. Very cost-effective, 200 million sequences for $2,000. Very efficient and very sensitive. So we can detect unknown pathogens or pathogens that are present at very, very low levels. This is all being put together as a basis for DNA-based grapevine certification. And this is an article from a journal called Wines and Vines talking about replacing certification with DNA testing. So we can now use this DNA testing tool to provide certified, genetically pure grapevines that are free of pathogens. This kind of program in California has been estimated to have a value of over $1 billion. So by using this kind of sequencing, by applying it to pure stock, you can really create a lot of value. Of course, to do that, you need not only the data acquisition, data aggregation approaches, but you need the analytical tools, the computer tools, the software tools to rapidly evaluate all that data and make some management decisions based on that analysis. The other area that's important is precision farming. And precision farming is becoming super important. I'll show you some examples. But this is just one example of big data coming to the farm. US farms are generating almost $400 billion in value, and almost all farm equipment is now equipped with sensors. 60% of farmers report using some sort of precision data in their everyday practices. In this particular example, these are sensors that are mounted on equipment, on machinery, so ground-based sensors that are playing a role in collecting data for analysis. In addition to that, though, in addition to these ground-based sensors, there are also a number of aerial sensors, satellite or drone centers. But this kind of data aggregation is driving farm management decisions. And this is really important if we go back to this total factor productivity in order to make a decision exactly how to manage this 10 square meters may be quite different than how you manage these 10 square meters. But for your total factor productivity, you need to have this kind of resolution to make decisions that reflect a heterogeneous environment. This is one company. It's called the Climate Corporation. It's spun out from Google. It was recently acquired for $3 billion. And what this company is doing is they're aggregating data from weather sensors, from remote sensors, and from ground sensors to put these together to inform management decisions. So they're really acquiring the data and aggregating data from a number of different sources. Of course, the important part as well is how to analyze that data. And I have a little clip here from IBM that is just a few minutes, but it talks about what IBM is doing to evaluate weather data for agriculture. It's called Deep Thunder.
Well, most of agriculture, is directly driven by weather. For farmers, our interest is really being able to reduce the economic impact of weather, good or bad. So ultimately, it's about crops being produced more efficiently, being able to distribute those crops to market more efficiently, and having greater quality and greater amount also for that distribution. Also, to avoid runoff of fertilizer or pesticides, that more efficient use of such supplies, also helps the farmer's bottom line. We believe precision farming driven by better weather forecasts can have a strong improvement on farm efficiency and therefore have a positive economic impact. But it's not just better weather forecasts, it's really trying to connect that to the farm processes. So for example, with irrigation, the system is all set up to put the water down in areas that are known to need it tomorrow and won't be wasted because of rain. Deep Thunder refers to sort of our system and service around the business of weather. And so by the business of weather, it means understanding the impacts of weather on business processes. And it's a capability that we've been working on here at IBM Research. And it's different than what you think about like weather forecasts on television. Getting the better weather forecast is ultimately insufficient, even though it's a prerequisite. We really have to connect that to the business. What we do is that we're starting with better weather forecasts and then coupling that to the analytics and visualization that connect to the business processes. So the weather is where we begin, the traditional services, weather is where they end. But an important aspect of what some of those services do is that they do collect meteorological data, and we build on that data. So an example of that is work we've been doing in Rio de Janeiro, where we are doing weather forecasts and using the rainfall estimates to predict flash floods. In other cases, the modeling that we may introduce will be based on different techniques, like statistical techniques. So our ability to predict electric outages for a utility and the restoration effort, we use statistical modeling techniques that incorporate weather and outage and other data from the utility company in order to create the appropriate model for a forecast. This has been very gratifying to see that these ideas are being deployed, people are using it, it's having impact, has the potential to save lives and property. It doesn't get much better than that.
So I think that really is a good example of how you can have a lot of data, but unless it is analyzed, presented graphically or visually, that it can really be turned into business management decisions. Of course, a lot of this information is delivered on cell phones, And of course, you see this on most industrial farms in the US, but what's really interesting is you're seeing the same kind of applications in Africa as well, in developing countries that farmers can get price information, weather information on their cell phone in real time. So the applications are really broad and will be very far-reaching, and they're really necessary to meet the agricultural challenges that are coming up. This is just a little bit more of the same data, but again, really focusing on the heterogeneity that I talked about earlier. These kind of decision-making tools need to have a fine resolution that you can really make decisions that are based on a few square meters rather than a few hectares. One of the projects that we're working on here in Chile is also with vineyards, looking at water use efficiency and cost-effective technologies to measure water loss and use. And so the goal here is to create a network of sensors that may be linked by a cellular network and algorithms to interpret multiple types of data input in order to optimize irrigation strategies. Will be important in vineyards, but of course it's important in a number of crops, especially orchard crops here in Chile as well. So that's one area that we're beginning to work on, and hopefully we'll have something on the ground fairly soon in that area as well. So I think that's it. Just a little bit of an overview, a couple of areas where big data is important, but I think in general, it is an area of huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity in a lot of places, but I think importantly in Chile, because farmers in Chile are very progressive. Farming is quite profitable here, and so there is a real value in having the kind of detailed information and analytical tools that can be applied on farm. And solutions that are developed in Iowa are really not going to be relevant here in Chile. They really need to be developed locally and in the context of the environment. So I think there's huge opportunity here in Chile, a huge business opportunity to start taking this data and finding ways to use it in practical ways. Thank you.
I want to ask you about, you showed there some experience here in Chile about installing some sensors in field. In your experience, do you think the local farmers are willing to install this technology to have some return in this investment?
Yeah. By coincidence, I had dinner last night with someone who is selling farm machinery here. He had just been on a large walnut farm, about 300 hectares. This walnut farm had a complete sensor network, and we're using that to make daily decisions, along with additional analytical tools looking at specific nutrients in the leaves. So this was obviously a very progressive farmer, but one who was, at least he believed, he was making a profit by having this kind of detailed information. So I think you're going to find, of course, the larger farms likely to make that investment first, become progressive farmers. It's what we, of course, experience in California as well. So I know for sure there are some farmers that are. I'm sure there are many others that would be late adopters, but eventually, if it's valuable, the whole industry will adopt. So yes, and there are examples here in Chile.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Alan, how hard or is the same question, but in California? Mm-hmm. Because how easy is to sell technology to farmers in California or in the US in general? We have some companies that are developing technology here mm-hmm. that we think could be useful there. For instance, mm-hmm. we have a small company, that developed a machine to automatically classify almonds because we have the same issues that in California. We have a shortage of people to do manual work, or what used to be manual work.
Yeah.
And California is the first producer of almonds in the world. So our expectation there is to develop technology here, test the technology here, but open the market there. Do you think that would work? How easy would it be?
Well, I think the difficulty will be the competition, because almost any problem that exists in California, there are 5 or 10 companies who are there trying to solve it. So obviously, it depends on the what is the comparative advantage of what's being developed here. But in fact, the person I had dinner with last night is here selling sorting machines for walnuts, and they also sell similar kinds of machines for blueberries as well. I'm not sure if they're doing almonds, but yeah, absolutely. There's a huge demand for technology in California, especially anything that will offset labor costs, because labor is not only so difficult, you can't get it anymore.
¿Alguien más? No.
But I think otherwise moving the microphone to say, the other opportunity is there are a lot of technologies developed in California, including these kinds of database technologies, that could be really useful here, but they can't be transferred directly. They need to be adapted to the climatic conditions here, to the geographic conditions here. So there's probably opportunities to take technologies, take software solutions off the shelf, but modify them, customize them for applications in Chile.
Hi, Alan.
Hi.
Great presentation. I think on the first slide mentioned that UC Davis has licensed technology 700 times. Can you talk a little bit about how the university works to spin out technology which is developed there into startups, private sector, and what role the university has in that sort of path post spin out?
Yeah. I have a whole presentation about that. We have the program at Davis is probably about 20 years old, but really 10 years in a serious form. And it has a very systematic approach to licensing to existing companies. Some of these include, for example, plant varieties. Strawberry varieties are grown all over the world, licensed from California. Also pharmaceuticals, a number of biomedical devices and engineering. So among these, there are specific licensing strategies in each sector that we've worked out and are reasonably robust. In addition to that, we have developed a systematic approach to starting up companies and to help inventors and researchers start companies. It starts with working with them to develop an intellectual property strategy to perfect the portfolio. It has something we call LegalNet, a group of law firms that work with startup companies, provide support for corporate development, governance, et cetera. And these law firms provide that usually either in exchange for equity or for some kind of deferred payment. And then we also have an investor network that we link these companies with to get early stage investment. So it's a pretty systematic process. In the last 2 years, there have been 29 companies spun out of the university. We're looking to see if there are ways to support some of the Chilean universities to not use our program, but to replicate the program elements here in Chile for the conditions here in Chile. And that's what I'll be doing the rest of today, is working with some of these universities to see if there may be a way to provide that same kind of support. So it's a process that's been, it's never perfected, but it's been developed for several years, so we have a pretty systematic process.
Bueno, les pido un aplauso, un agradecimiento a Alan y al equipo de UC Davis que nos está acompañando.